Welcome back to another mini episode of the podcast, the Authentic Man podcast, with me, your host, David Chambers. And I do these little episodes to people to get a bite-sized idea or to cover one small topic, so people can get a real fresh idea on something. And I'm going to continue from the theme of last week's conversation about Mr. Russell Brand. And this is less about... This is kind of off the back of a few conversations I've had with men and women and people in general around the piece about the allegations around him being kind of in his 30s and him having relations with a 16-year-old woman or girl, depending how you want to say that. And someone was saying to me, they were like, yeah, but it's legal, it's okay. Like, it's not right. It's not, good. It's not the best practice, but like, it's legal, so it's okay. And I said, I was talking to them, and I'm going to cover some of the points here, was like, the age of consent we have in the UK is like 16. I think in the States it's 18. I think even in some European countries it might be younger than that. It might be 15 or 14. I'm not completely sure. And I think that's the age of consent. I think is not really a question, in my opinion. I think that the age of consent at 16 is fine. A lot of people are getting sexually active before 16, if you're really honest. But that really works well when you're kind of, being with people who are your peers and around your age, like a 16-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl, exploring sexually together, clueless as they may be, is quite a healthy thing for them to do, or for 16 and 17-year-olds, or even 16 and 18-year-olds and so forth. But I think when we start getting into the area of an adult person, man or woman who's in their kind of 30s, and you're kind of, sleeping with 16-year-olds, you start after being like, wow, there's, first of all, when I was in my 30s, I wasn't messing around with 16-year-olds. That's one thing. You have to kind of ask, like, why would you want to do that? Like, I've always been really suspicious of, like, I'm sure, some of your listeners, when I was at school, there would be girls, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm dating a guy, she's 15, 16, and she'd be like, oh, I'm dating this guy, he's 23, he's 24. And I used to always think to myself, like, wow, like, why would you at that age be, dating girls who are like school age, 15, 16 years old? I used to always think it's really weird and really strange. And when I got into my 20s, like, I kind of continued that belief. And I came to my own personal conclusion, and my personal conclusion is that often people date people considered to be younger than them just due to their own immaturity, if I'm honest. It's not always the case. Like, I think when you get much older, when it's like a 40-year-old person and a 60 or 70-year-old person, that doesn't start to hold so watertight, but definitely in those younger years, because that gap between 16 and 25 is huge, developmentally, right? If you're like 16 years old and your partner's 24, 25, the 24, 25-year-old, their brain is almost completely fully developed. The front prefrontal cortex, their emotional capacities are really developed. And the experience they should have had in life, or most likely had in life, is actually well beyond the person who is, they're just in their school years. So I think it opens up the door for manipulation, whether that's emotional manipulation or general manipulation of, being able to say things because you're older. But you also have this power dynamic of the older person, the assumption that they are wiser, they are older, they are good, they are treating me well. And I've definitely seen that abused by people in the past. So I do feel that there's an uncomfortability with, someone in their 30s or even in their late 20s messing around with 16-year-olds. I think there's conversation in the UK about looking at those laws and like maybe ring fencing it so that 16-year-olds and so forth can mess around each other, but actually to make it clear that there is a power dynamic at play if someone is a lot older. A lot older. I remember when I was traveling, actually, I was about 31, maybe 30, 31. And I was full disclosure, I was on a trip, on a boating trip, and I met this girl. She was one of the crew working for the company, and then we ended up sleeping together one day. And it was only towards the end of the trip that somehow she said how old she was. She was 18, and I was shocked. I had no idea how old she was. I assumed because she was working there, she was much older. And I was completely unaware. But I do think that even then I was a bit like, I felt a bit I felt a bit bad. Part of me was a bit like, oh God, like she's really young and I'm like in my 30s. And we actually never slept together again after I found out, because I always feel like there's a funny power dynamic at play with younger people, because young people look up to older people, assuming they know better, they know more, and so forth. And I think we just have to be really mindful. And I think it's much more acceptable socially to a degree for men to date women a lot younger. So I guess there's a message even to people in their 20s and 30s. It's like, as much as you may say, oh, but 16-year-olds, they look so mature these days. They do and they don't. Like I've got younger sisters who were about 9-10 years younger than me, and I remember seeing their friends when I was in my 20s, and they would have been kind of like 16-17 years old, and I'd be like, wow, they look so much older now than they did when they were like 14, 15, or even younger, because I've known a lot of their friends from a young age. But there was still this very clear innocence and a very clear kind of youngness to them that I imagine some people find attractive, right? But for me, it was actually the opposite, because what it screamed off is they don't know what they really want and don't want, and they go along with things because they think they have to look a certain way. And that's one thing that we have to be so mindful of, is that, if you're a man, I'm using an example of a man because I'm a man, it's easier to speak from this point of view, and you're in your early 30s and you meet someone and they're like, I'm 16, 17 years old, and they will think that they know themselves. They think that they know the choices they're making and why they're doing things and the yeses and nos. But ultimately, they're doing so many things just so the world looks at them in a certain way. I'm not saying that older people don't do that, but older people have more brain capacity. They've had more experience. So when you are with people who are younger in that capacity, which I don't think is healthy, it's to really be clear, like, actually this person may just be doing things to please me and because they want me to like them more and more. And again, it's not that doesn't happen in relationships when there's less of an age gap, but I just think there's a lot more scope for kind of harm to be done, and manipulation, and people doing things that maybe are not fully in line what they really want, and they're just doing it to uphold the dynamic and having this person who's older in their life and they look up to. Because, like I said, I've seen it many times with friends, and even in my life when I was probably in my mid-30s and dating people who, from time to time, who are in their mid-20s, and I could see that there's this big gulf in experience and wisdom because of all the things I'd done, all the places I'd been, all the things I'd lived. And it creates a dynamic of someone looking up to you a bit like, oh, wow, they're so amazing. They've done so many amazing things. And that creates a situation where it's open for abuse, not even deliberately. It could be very accidental. You're dating, you're seeing a young girl and you think, oh, great, like this is fun. And you may say to her, look, I don't want anything serious. The old, I've said these words many times before, I don't want anything serious. And she'll just say yes, maybe she really loves you and wants more, but she'll go along with it to, keep your attention, keep the attention she's getting. So I must say, that big age gap, I really frown upon it. And I'm sure many people will be like, oh yeah, but like I said, if you might say it's legal, it's not. Just because something's legal doesn't make it right. That's something we have to remember. Just because something's legal doesn't make it morally right. It doesn't mean that it's something that you want to be doing. Doesn't mean it's something that you would want someone to engage with, your friend, your sister, or whatever it may be. So, just remember, is it right? I don't really think so. If I had a friend of mine, I'm now almost in my 40s, and he's like, hey, I'm dating this girl that's 20. I'd be like, dude, like, you should be more mature than this, than really being able to, someone who's only lived 20 years and you've almost lived twice as long. If your kind of level of maturity is like in line with each other, then you need to do some maturing, because as much as mature as many 20-year-olds are, they're not on the same level of the conversation I have when I sit with my friends who are all around my age. And that's just been my experience from retreats I've been on and all sorts. So like those years of experience mean something, that people learn about themselves and what they want, and they're less prone to looking good, I think, in my opinion, and doing things for approval of the outside world, or to look mature and older and so forth. But this is just my thoughts. Might be useful for some people. It might be incredibly triggering for some people as well. But, such is life. And yeah, that's probably it for today. If you're listening to this and you're a man and, dating relationships is a tricky area for you, then this is the area that I really help men. I'm seeing some wonderful gains, results and successes in the men I'm working with, from really getting over anxiety in their dating lives to men being able to really create the depth of connection they want in their relationships, and men letting go of a lot of sexual shame and enduring wonderful sexual relationships with women they meet. So if that's something you'd like a little bit of help on, get in contact or listen to a few more podcasts. But I'll say ciao for now.